Hello and welcome to the Financial Express. We are doing a series of comments in the run-up to the budget 2022. What do we expect from Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman this year? Well, I have a couple of industry veterans with me. I have Dr. Ajai Chowdhry, who was the co-founder of HCL and also with Epic Foundation. I also have Dr. Satya Gupta, who is an advisor with IESA, or the Semiconductor Association as well. So, I mean, both the areas where these gentlemen come from, there are a lot of expectations in the budget. So if I could probably just start with you, Dr. Chowdhry, what do you expect from Ms. Sitharaman this year?
Well, actually, specifically, I would like to focus on the issue of loss of learning in schools, because this is a very serious problem. And as a result of the loss of learning in schools due to the COVID, what we have seen is that the availability of device, availability of internet has actually, or actually I should say not proper availability of both, has created a huge digital divide. And I think for the children who will be joining back in school pretty much after 2 years,
right,
it is going to be quite critical that they have a hybrid situation of learning.
Right.
Because they have at least they've lost 1 year, if not more, in what has happened due to last 2 years. So for them to catch up will not be easy. And for catching up, they will have to go to school, and they will also have to spend time after school using technology to get back to where they were 2 years ago. Now, the challenge during the last 2 years has been that, yes, some of the organizations have put out online lectures, etc., but the children never had the right device. Now, some of the homes have a smartphone, but the smartphone has too small a screen for children to learn from. Because if you want to play videos and use the newer technologies like AR, VR, etc., that's not an adequate screen. So what my expectation from the budget would be that the government go all out to provide tablets to school children. There are 25 crore school children, and a lot of them are in the lower end of this level. So I think time has come for the government to actually think in terms of providing tablets to all school children all over the country, and also enable internet to be available everywhere. I mean, my dream has always been to see that broadband becomes a fundamental right.
Okay.
And if that is something that can be looked at, I think we will have a very, very good future for the children.
Okay, just holding on to that thought, I'd like to get a comment from Dr. Satya Gupta in here. In the last 1 year, because of the pandemic, there have been so many industries that have been shut down or have faced a slowdown. And since you are associated with the Semiconductor Association, and semiconductor is one word which has been bandied about quite a bit in the last 1 year, because the auto industry specifically and many other allied industries have been hit by a shortage of semiconductors. What do you expect this budget would do? There is talk of making semiconductors in India, setting up fabs. What do you expect Sitharaman would do in this budget for this particular sector?
So I think basically, if you look at the activities in last 2 months, government has already announced a package of 76,000 crore, $10 billion of basically outlay towards building semiconductor manufacturing, semiconductor design, and all this basically, right? But if we look at the, let's say, industry like auto industry, there are basically multiple layers between them and the fab, right? So I think in the country or in any industry, right, the products basically lead the manufacturing products, basically which leads the research also, right? So although there has been some basically allocation towards the end products in the current this semiconductor scheme, we can emphasize more on the product creation. So between semiconductor fab and basically end customer can basically become shorter. Right? For example, if you are using a chip in semiconductor area in an engine control unit, right, on a traditional car, right? Basically, multiple layers. Basically, from the fab, it goes to a basically fabless chip company like NXP and all those things. From there, it goes to tier 3, tier 2, tier 1, and finally, as a module, it goes into the car, right? So, in terms of the end product, which directly gets sold to the car manufacturers, right? Those kind of the company which we call electronics product companies, right? Yeah. They can be incentivized further. And typically, what I usually say, if you have $100 to spend on any industry, right, semiconductor or electronics, you spend 80% of that, $80 on manufacturing. You spend $15 out of that in basically product creation and in basically long-term research so that you can bring that competitiveness, right? So I think we need to do more on the product side. So whether it's a product for automotive or product for what basically Ajay sir was saying, right? All of those areas, tablets, smart meters, automotive products for telecom and all those things, right? Yeah. Once we build a robust product ecosystem, that will automatically drive the demand for the fab. Okay. The product, then basically there is a lack of the demand for the fab also, right? So we need to put more emphasis. So if I have to say it kind of the ask from the government, they should put basically about $500 million towards basically incentivize the product creation, similar to what was done basically some years back in Electronics Development Fund, right? But that model did not work. We need to make the model better and approximately put $500 million in EDF so that basically product companies can come to assist the semiconductor policy.
Right. Dr. Chowdhry, if I could come back to you, about 3 decades ago when you all were in setting up HCL and selling computers at that point of time, India was a very different landscape. But today, we have so many startups and so many new companies that are coming about. In this budget, do you think there will be a fresh impetus looking at the kind of entrepreneurs that have come out last year and the number of new unicorns that were developed in the last 1 year? You think there'll be a fresh focus on startups, either good or bad? Do you think there'll be a higher taxation? There's always been the issue of angel tax as well for startups. So what's your view on this? That what would come out of it?
See, in the last 8 to 10 years, if you look back 10 years ago and you walked into a conversation in a drawing room, everybody used to ask me, why can't India have a Google?
Right.
I think that's been put to rest in the last 10 years because the sheer development of software products for the world and a lot of SaaS companies are the ones that have become unicorns. So, this whole development of the software product industry in startups has happened in a pretty big way. And that is really very encouraging. Now, what is needed is the same thing should happen in hardware. And we need to encourage and provide funding for startups in hardware. So, today, if you look at most VCs, there are really no VCs who fund hardware startups. It's all software. So this is where the government needs to step in and create a model by which more and more startups start to work on the hardware product ecosystem.
Right.
So as my colleague, Dr. Satya Gupta said, we have to focus on products, but through startups, we can create some very interesting opportunities for the country. I've been involved with a incubator in Delhi University, which was originally set up by MeitY along with some of the associations.
Yeah.
And it is fundamentally focusing on hardware. And the interesting part is in the last 5 years, they've created 50 product companies and close to 60, 70 patents.
Okay.
So that needs to be made huge. And Startup India needs to start looking at hardware as a very big vertical. Because as we believe, unless product companies happen, the semiconductor will have no market. The semiconductor plant will have no market.
Yeah.
So that is part one as far as startups are concerned. And that is where I would like the government to pay a lot of attention. The other thing that's been pending for very, very long is that all startups attract people into their organizations by ESOPs.
Yeah.
Now, today, ESOPs get taxed when they actually get the stock option.
Yeah.
When it gets vested. That is ridiculous. What they should do is they should tax it when they sell it.
You think that's going to come in this budget? Will there be any change in the tax structure, at least for corporates this time?
I don't know, because I think there's been a lot of work the government has done on taxation for corporates. And the interesting part of, if you created a new manufacturing company, the tax went down to 15%. So, some of those interesting things have already happened. So we don't need to ask for anything more. I think what we need is these two initiatives for startups.
Dr. Gupta, what's your view in terms of startups? How do you see this year ahead being incentivized in this budget in any form?
Yeah, so just to add to Ajay sir, I think we need to understand hardware startups which have very different needs than a software startup, right? Right now, we are putting, whether it's the Startup India or any program, we put everything into the same bucket, right? The needs, the capital needs, the infrastructure need, the ecosystem support needs for a hardware company is very different than a software company, right? So I think that has to be understood clearly by the basically government and put strong emphasis on basically building the right support ecosystem for the hardware companies, whether it's a VCs, government funding, and other channels, right?
Right.
You cannot apply the same formula which you apply for a software startup to the hardware startup, right? Because the capital needs, the time it takes, right? Means a software company, maybe it takes 4 to 5 years to get somewhere, right? Whereas hardware company may take 7 to 8 years basically get the same. You need much more risk capital in basically a hardware startup, right?
Dr. Chowdhry, the whole Atmanirbhar Bharat movement that the government has initiated. In this budget, what's your view?
Atmanirbhar Bharat is really a very large umbrella.
Yeah.
And under that sit many, many things and many, many verticals. And I think the government needs to keep on, creating newer areas where we need to invest. And I think one of the biggest areas that I believe the government needs to continue to invest is electronics along with electric vehicles.
Okay.
Now, why am I talking about these two things together? 70% of an electric vehicle is electronics.
Yes.
So I think that is where we should put a lot of effort and energy in terms of design to manufacture and provide funding for design to manufacture rather than just manufacture. If you look at the whole Atmanirbhar Bharat and PLI schemes of various verticals that have come around, they're all oriented towards bigger companies and they're all oriented towards manufacturing and volumes.
Right.
In addition to manufacturing and volumes, what is required is depth in manufacturing. And depth in manufacturing comes with design and buying components locally so that there is higher domestic value addition. That is something that they need to start to incentivize. And that has not happened in any of the PLI schemes. The first scheme that started in is the DLI scheme in the semiconductor area.
Yes.
Now, let's look a little beyond. Atmanirbhar has one very important component, which is that we are importing too many products from China today.
Right.
And if you look at last 1 year, the growth of Chinese imports has been monumental. This needs correction because literally we are becoming a colony of the Chinese. And we are allowing all our brands in whatever area you look at to be eaten up by them. This is something that Atmanirbharta should correct this situation and incentivize things that can be created in India, made in India. And I'll go a little step beyond. Look at medical electronics. The import of medical products last year is phenomenal from China. Now, current PLI for medical equipment and electronics covers only a small portion of the products. It needs to go completely broad, and it needs to take up startups to work on this area. Today, startups are not incentivized in the medical electronics area. And since it does not come under MeitY, it comes under Pharma. Pharma ministry has to correct this. And they need to bring MSMEs and startups into the medical electronics PLI.
Okay. But on the other hand, I mean, you mentioned China, and yes, we do import a lot of electronics and other goods from China. But should we also be probably taking a leaf out of the Chinese playbook in the way they have developed their manufacturing facilities and the way they have actually developed their economy?
Well, actually, the government has now come up with a new vision document, which is looking at exports in a very big way for electronics. And that is where what will solve the problem. But that still does not take care of the depth in manufacturing. And I think that is the area that I find missing in our whole thinking as far as PLIs are concerned in every area of the country.
Okay, so very quickly, what do we lack? Is it skill, or is it the costs involved in setting up our own manufacturing units here in India?
No, you see, skills is no longer an issue. A lot of work has been done on skills by Skills India, and we have an electronic sector skills council. So that's not the issue. The issue is to incentivize something which has not been incentivized.
Okay.
Today, we are incentivizing only volume manufacturing. Today, we are incentivizing only large companies. We need to incentivize MSMEs, and we need to incentivize startups in all these areas so that they will be the engine for creating new products and new things. Because a lot of innovation does not happen in big companies. Innovation happens in small companies.
See, typically, government's focus is on manufacturing and basically job creation. Right? These are the two focus areas. Yeah. But if you look at the traditional industry, let's say steel, automotive, cement, anything, right? There the product and manufacturing are basically done by the same company, and it is one and the same thing, right? So if auto manufacturing, that means auto product also, right? Cement manufacturing, cement product also, right? Steel manufacturing, steel product also, right? Electronic industry does not work that way, right? Apple is the product owner and Foxconn is the manufacturer, right? Okay, so I think that difference has to be basically understood, that pure manufacturing in electronics area adds only 8 to 10% value addition. Traditional industry where 40 to 45% value addition gets added by manufacturing company, because product and manufacturing go hand in hand, right? So electronics industry runs on the contract manufacturing model. So look at only manufacturing and don't look at the product, then you are addressing a problem of 8 to 10% of the value addition only, right? So whether basically product creation happens through MSME, startups, or basically branded companies like Apple's of the world, right? Like Apple does not manufacture any of its own products.
Absolutely, right? Yeah.
But they are the biggest beneficiary on the value chain. I think that is the big difference between any other traditional industry and electronics and semiconductor industry, because value remains with the product companies and manufacturing is only 8 to 10% of the basically whole game. Right? I think once that difference is basically understood, then we will create what basically Sir is saying about depth in manufacturing, right?
Yeah.
That will come when product company and manufacturing company both are incentivized together, rather than focusing on the manufacturing, because then you are going to solve only 8 to 10% of value addition.
Okay, that's a very valuable input, and thank you so much.